Welcome to War Room Impeachment, episode 104. We're live from Capitol Hill. It's a special edition this afternoon because so much news is breaking on the war in the Middle East, an impeachment, War Powers Act, the impeachment inquiry. It's just jam-packed. We're here with Raheem Kassam, Jason Miller, and I want to go to immediately into the this kind of very, very thoughtful, very reflective, very measured performance today by the President of the United States. Jason, you and Raheem absolutely called it this morning on the morning show. It's like you're writing the talking points. It was quite brilliant about how you guys assessed what had to happen. So I don't know if we want to do clips first, guys, and then comment, or well, first off, tell us. I want to know, why did you think it was going to play out like this?
So because when the president's coming out there and he's making an announcement like this, you don't want to leave any room for error. You want to go and you have a message to drive. You don't want to have some fake news person raising their hand, trying to jam you up and ask you about some random question. He has a very specific message to drive. We saw last night the key players that were in the sit room with the president.
Yes.
And there was something, Steve, just to be real blunt about this, we're talking before the show. This did not feel like your typical West Wing speech. This felt very much, there were some folks who had some real serious foreign policy gravitas who got this, but there were the clear moments, for example, when President Trump brought up that we're energy independent. Those were classic things where you can see the president literally grabbing the black Sharpie and saying, I want to put this line in there.
Right.
But it was a perfect mix, and you could tell there was a lot of work that went into this in very short, quick order. But we look at the framing. When the president walked out, and first of all, you had the VP and Pompeo, DOD Secretary Esper.
And General Milley. You had the team.
Joint Chiefs. You had the team. And that was key because it showed unity. And it showed everyone together. But right off the top, literally before President Trump even said good morning, he walks out and he says, as long as I'm president of the United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. When I was hammering on the show this morning about needing to demonstrate vision, about needing to say, where is this going? What has this all been about? Literally, President Trump walked out there, and for all the criticism he's received about not being direct enough over this past week, even before he said good morning, he laid out exactly what this has been about. And that's even before he got into the education on who Soleimani was, which is very important in going through his stick and his carrot. And we can go a little bit more into that with some of the clips.
Raheem.
Look, it was short. It was to the point. It was about 9 minutes long. It was to the point, although it was short, but I think 30 minutes late. And the suggestion was that there was work on the statement right up until the president walked out into the grand lobby of the White House and delivered it. And it was kind of a victory lap without taking too much of a victory lap, right? It was what we said this morning. We got the guy. We got our target. There's been no American casualties. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. We're out. We're done. We don't want to do this. We don't want to have to go to war. There was still a threat, and there was still important news about where Iran sits as far as President Trump and the administration is concerned. Iran's role in the broader international community. There's going to be tougher sanctions, they said. They're going to ratchet up pressure on the United Kingdom and Germany and France and Russia. They said,
our allies or some other people in the international community.
Some would call them allies, some would call them dependents, some would call them protectorates. But ratcheting up pressure so that the JCPOA, the Iran deal, which we know has been pretty much a failure, can be changed, can be more to the point, and don't have to result in $150 billion of American cash going over to Iran as a bribe and then being used by Soleimani to wage war against the U.S. And of course, finally, President Trump used the opportunity to take a hit at the Obama administration for doing just that, for kowtowing to the Iranian regime and providing them with resources.
You want to play? Let's hear some of the speech.
The United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Good morning. I'm pleased to inform you the American people should be extremely grateful and happy. No Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime. We suffered no casualties. All of our soldiers are safe, and only minimal damage was sustained at our military bases.
So that's the president talking about, of course, something we mentioned this morning, which was the fact that perhaps the Iranians missed on purpose. And that's a big deal. It's a big part of what happened today.
The brilliance of that is to come out and actually to say, they will never have nuclear weapons as long as I'm president before you even say good morning.
Exactly. And because here's why. In the media pregame, we were watching CNN beforehand, and all the panelists around and bloviating and throwing out their points. And there are three messages that really stood out. Number one, that they wanted to see the off-ramp, that this is how they would define President Trump having any possibility towards victory. He had to show an off-ramp. Number two, make clear that there's going to be a de-escalation. And number three, to the point Raheem just brought up, this quote-unquote willingness to negotiate. And this was, in particular, David Sanger was throwing out kind of this moving goalpost for the president that he could only be successful if he talked about a willingness to negotiate, particularly about the Iran nuclear deal. Here was the genius of what this speech did. Not only did it go and flip the script, but it then put out a carrot, a very specific carrot about our allies needing to stand up and be a part of this mix. But there's also a carrot for the Iranian people. There's a very specific reference to Iran's internal protests, talking about how Iran must abandon their nuclear ambitions, talking about the freedom-loving people of Iran. But he also sent a very clear message to the theocracy there. Your campaign of terror, murder, and mayhem will not be tolerated any longer. But by reaching out to the Iranian people, I think President Trump made clear, yes, we're having a de-escalation here, and I want peace. I want to make the world a safer place. But he did it in his way, not the kowtow way that I think the mainstream media wanted to get him sucked into.
So walk through that again so people understand this. Well, the mainstream media are trying to box him in overnight and this morning. How are they trying to box him in? Where were they trying to force him into?
Where they wanted to just make this real succinct, where the mainstream media wanted President Trump to go is for him to be successful during today's speech, that he would have to come out and say, I want a willingness to negotiate, as in the failed foreign policy, the traditional quote-unquote diplomacy that's worked, but real specific. Right. They wanted him to come out and say, I'm on board with renegotiating the JCPOA, and anything other than this is an abject failure. Right. But he came out and flipped the script and showed that he wanted peace, showed that we're going to be tough, everything from the big missiles to we have the best military in the world. He did it in a way,
and we're gonna really get economic sanctions. We're gonna hit him back with economic warfare, and guess what? Our allies are going to be with us.
Yes, and he did it in a way, and here was the thing that was so key. The media had been working overtime. I mean, heck, there's literally a Washington Post story out there right now. I mean, Trump's Iran gambit reveals ideological rift between hawks and isolationists in his base. This is the post-speech article that the Washington Post has up there. They're trying to. It's why I said
they wrote that beforehand, and they just had to use it, right?
Right, but that's why I said on this morning show that they want to have that Hannity versus Tucker divide to split the Trump base. When in reality, Trump went out there and unified his base.
Yes. And what other? Go ahead.
Just to one of the points that Jason raised, which is an interesting one as far as I was concerned, geopolitically speaking, which was the appeal to the Iranian people in there. Do the Iranian people even get to hear something like this? How does this filter through?
So this is a really good point because we know that state-run media in Iran doesn't let a lot of info through. And in fact, when I went to college, someone who's originally from Iran, and when obviously this was in the 90s, and when he moved back home, I remember he opened up the lining of his jacket and sewed in a whole bunch of his favorite hip-hop CDs because he knew that if the theocrats caught him, that he would get in trouble. I mean, they're very restrictive, and I mean, that just tells you what people would go to for Biggie Smalls and Tupac back in the 90s. But these messages are important because I believe the number is 70% of all Iranians 35 and under, and so there's this coming crest within their populace, and it's
the mullahs poll it like 26%, 27% approval. Right.
And so when these people do get the information, it's important that they hear that President Trump wants to be their friend, that he wants to be their ally, because they know that they're being unfairly constrained by these theocrats.
Oh.
What any other polls or clips that we can hear from this?
Yeah, we can do this one.
We continue to evaluate options in response to Iranian aggression. The United States will immediately impose additional punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime. These powerful sanctions will remain until Iran changes its behavior. In recent months alone, Iran has seized ships in international waters, fired an unprovoked strike on Saudi Arabia, and shot down 2 U.S. drones. Iran's hostilities substantially increased after the foolish Iran nuclear deal was signed in 2013, and they were given $150 billion, not to mention $1.8 billion in cash.
That was a direct hit.
I love the way he says it in cash. He can't get. He goes back to the Obama, the $1 billion in cash on the pallets.
That was another. Remember during the campaign when they were blowing him up and they're saying, where are these pallets of cash? And then it turns out like he was right. It was literally on pallets of cash. I mean, it wasn't quite as great a prediction as Anthony Weiner's laptop, but it was pretty damn good.
Did this? Was the mainstream media? Let's talk about their reaction. They weren't prepared for this Trump, were they?
I don't think so at all. Jason, what do you think? But like you say, there were pre-written stories, there were preconceived notions about what he would go out there and say today. The way we talked about it this morning, the reason we talked about the way we talked about it this morning was the following. We know through working around this issue, knowing the man himself, that he doesn't like war. He doesn't like going into this stuff. It's just not in his veins to take a country to war. He really does understand.
He's a student of history. He understands his ability, the destructiveness of war is all encompassing.
And there's a lot of things you can say about the guy, but he really does fundamentally understand when a Gold Star family, veterans' parents go to him, they look him in the eye, he talks to these people. He really has great empathy, and he really internalizes what it means to send these people into the line of fire. He doesn't want that, and the media wasn't prepared for it, Jason.
Yeah, and I think that they thought where he was going to go is for further escalations. I think they thought he was going to walk out and say, as of 7 minutes ago, we have just eliminated the following 52 targets.
Do you believe they thought that, or he was, quote unquote, looking for the off-ramp, which is going to be the off-ramp that I'm going to open renegotiations at JCPOA? Do you actually think that they felt he would counterstrike with and go to this disproportionate response?
I think that's one of the
things. They might have been hoping for that.
Yeah, that may have been what they were hoping. I mean, I think they probably had a good sense of what was going to happen. I mean, there were enough leaked reports about what may be where the president may have been directionally going. But you even look at the media headlines following the speech. In the Financial Times, Trump backs away from military action against Iran. New York Times, Trump backs away from further military conflict.
He loves those headlines.
Right.
Backs away.
Bloomberg, Iran's forewarned strikes give Trump a path to avert all-out war. So now Bloomberg's even going the extra step and saying they already knew they weren't going to be real strikes, and so it's not a win for Trump. But the best headline that we've seen is President Trump so thoroughly broke the Huffington Post. Right now, the lead story on their website is Independence Day, Harry and Meghan bolt royal fam.
Hey,
that is
it's a big deal.
Sorry, I know, Raheem, we're going to get to that in the second part of the show.
No. But how much? Let's talk about that. When and we got to talk to SV Date to let him know that what's going on here.
I've texted him and I was like, "Are you okay?" And he hasn't gotten back to me. So I don't know. Maybe he went to the homepage.
Can somebody tell our audience who that is? By the way, otherwise
the chief White House correspondent for the Huffington Post. That's a big deal, though. They're the chief hater site, right? They're kind of the pop art hater site. When they got to flip and go to the Harry and Meghan narrative on a day like today, you've broken them.
No, I mean Harry and Meghan get more clicks though. They are desperate for clicks.
Were they? If you think about, also, I think was very difficult for the mainstream media to handle. He's full gangster on Thursday when he takes down General Sullivan, which is so. We've had so many people from the region come in here and talk to us. It's so incomprehensible if you're in the region, given how much the radicals thought of this guy, right? And in the region, his mythic proportion to literally take him out as he was taken out, and then to come all the way through this and to have that speech of really reaching out to people and say, hey, look, I'm not in this to go tick for tat on this. I'm not in this to escalate. I'm not in this to blow you guys back to the Stone Age. And quite frankly, some of our colleagues, like, if you take what Seb Gorka said he was going to do last night, compare it to today. But, what they think is what Seb was saying. Dr. Gorka does present the Hawks view on this, right? To have that speech today, which had gravitas to it, it had understanding to it, right? He was very well crafted, thought through, and hit. And it still said, that's why I don't think it's back away. No immediate military strike, but more engagement. In fact, we're leaning into this even more.
Well, sanctions. I mean, the talk of additional sanctions, and just to give folks an explanation on this, and I will admit I was not an expert on this until maybe about 6 months or a year ago, and I had someone kind of give me a briefing and walk me through it. There are already sanctions. It's basically illegal to do any business with Iran, as it is right now.
It's pure economic warfare.
Right.
Choke them down.
The secondary sanctions then put sanctions on anyone doing business with Iran. So who does that mean? That means, say, if you're a European supplier, that means if you're a European bank, there'll be sanctions then on you if you're doing any business with Iran.
And that sanctions means you're not going to do business with the United States of America.
Yes. And so you have a choice. You can either do business with Iran or you can do business with the United
These sanctions, the economic warfare is very important, and these sanctions are draconian. What has happened at the Treasury Department is that we have, for a whole host of reasons, looked the other way on some aspects that the Europeans are getting away from, and the Chinese particularly. So when the president comes out today, and what I loved about it, he called out our allies, right, particularly our favorite, France. And people have to remember, this is all part of a narrative. At the G7 in the last week of August, it was Macron that was bringing up, what's the foreign minister's name? Zarif? It was
Javad Zarif.
Zarif, the guy who can't get a visa into the United States, they let him come up on a plane, a 737 that actually made it out of Tehran airport, right? And
Too soon.
We got to talk about that.
Yeah.
How do you have a day?
We didn't talk about it.
No, we have to have it. Listen, they shot down a plane last night.
Yeah. Is that a conspiracy theory?
I think, well, at least what I'm hearing from everybody in the region is that there was not it didn't look like an engine failure.
Zelensky, the Ukrainians have taken off the original explanation, the engine failure explanation, removed it from all of the press releases and everything they put out last night. They're now saying they're launching a criminal investigation into how that plane went down.
A criminal investigation.
Yes, criminal.
Okay, so we had the speech, and the speech went, I think, magnificently for the simple reason the Huffington Post is talking about the royal family.
Broke them into pieces.
And even the stories, if you got to go down 2 or 3 stories, and they're kind of like these, there's not. He took the win out of sale.
Well, the other thing the media was spazzing out about was also the criticism of the previous administration. That was the point that really seemed to, I think on Twitter, in a not very articulate way, I said many in the media are butthurt over President Trump criticizing the previous administration, but that's exactly what it was.
Even I thought, given how great the speech was, right, how succinct it was on point, I thought that was a little bit of an aside that you might be able to do without, but of course President Trump is very adamant that he got handed a mess.
Can I tell you why I liked it?
Yep.
Because I think it harkened back to the Josh Meyer story in Politico on Project Cassandra about everything that went into the U.S. appeasing Iran as part of that deal. It talked about Hezbollah running money through Venezuela, the drug cartels, the money laundering.
It's huge, massive.
And it's Josh Myers, the reporter. It's a longer read, Project Cassandra, everything that went into it. But I think it's important. And look, when President Trump ran in 2016,
we'll link to that on the site.
It was an indictment on the foreign policy failures from both parties. And I think it was important to call this out.
Yes.
I tell you why I liked it. Substance, right? Everything has to go back to substance. And this is substance to do with what the other side is saying. What Joe Biden goes up there the day before and mispronounces Iraq as Iran. But he goes up the day before and he starts hurling abuse. This was a guy who was vice president when this whole mess was being formulated. And here's the thing. We can't sit here the day before and say, hey, they need more substance about who this Soleimani guy is, how we got to this situation in the first place, and then blame him for including substance in the speech. Now, if anything was missing from the speech, I'd be interested in what you guys think about this. If anything was missing from the speech, for me, it was a little too short, right? I wanted a little bit more detail. He went into Soleimani in a little bit of detail, PMF, Hezbollah, that kind of thing. I would have literally said 300 dead here, X dead here, this amount there, the PMF funding here, the Hezbollah funding here, all of this.
Marine barracks in '83, the whole thing.
I would have done a whole punch list of that, so that the media, so that the media has something to actually report rather than Harry and Meghan flitting off to La La Land.
Let's talk. You're talking about substance. There was supposed to be substance on Capitol Hill this afternoon. After the speech, is now people want to know 2 things: what brought on the attack when it happened, and what's the plan going forward? And so today, Jason, you take it and then Raheem jump in. There were supposed to be these briefings, highly classified briefings by the top people. They sent Grundoons the other day. That didn't work. Today was supposed to be the top people going over briefing the senators and congressmen.
So the briefing on the Senate side did not go well. I think that's probably an understatement. Both Senator Rand Paul, who's been a guest of the show, as well as Senator Mike Lee, have both come out saying that they will support the War Powers Resolution on the Senate side. They said that the briefings that they received on the Senate side were very inferior. In fact, Lee said that he called the briefing insulting and demeaning to senators.
No, he said it's the worst briefing he's had on the military in 9 years.
Yeah, he said, probably the worst briefing he's ever seen, and he's pretty ticked off, and they're ticked off, and obviously we don't know exactly. And Lee kind of checked himself a little bit in his stand-up press avail afterwards. Said, "I want to have a conversation with the president, so he knows essentially the garbage that we were shoveled today."
Do we know who was it? Esper, General Milley? Do we know who actually gave the briefing? That's pretty. Mike Lee, who's never been a big fan of the president, but has obviously worked with him very closely since now they're in office, was one of the guys at the convention, was opposed him. But Mike Lee's a serious guy. So when Mike Lee says that, and he has to know how many times that's going to be played over and over again on the mainstream media. Raheem, you're not buying?
The latter, not the former. He definitely knows how much. I'm not sure that Mike Lee is always a serious guy. I think Mike Lee often allows himself to be sort of dragged along into the Trump derangement syndrome arena, and that's fine. That's Mike Lee. We'll expect to hear that. There's a little bit of breaking news as well that's just coming out of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said, "I believe, based on what I saw of the Iran attack and what I know, that they were intended to cause structural damage, destroy vehicles and equipment and aircraft, and to kill personnel. That's my own personal assessment." That's just come out from
the attack from last night.
The attack from last night.
So in other words, it was not. He's going against the narrative that they planned not to do this.
Seems to be the case.
Big spread between the big and the S. Okay, we're here on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Salem Broadcast Radio Network, America's Voice.news, and of course, Newsmax TV. Raheem, how can people get to the site 24 hours a day now that we're covering a war also?
Warroom.org is the URL. You can sign up for the newsletter on the right-hand side of the site. Along the top of the site, it tells you all the different podcast platforms. You can download War Room Impeachment every single day. Sometimes, if you're lucky, and especially if we're lucky, twice a day here from the basement in Capitol Hill.
We're going to take a break. Raheem, Jason, myself will return in a moment. Jason, what did you think about not taking the questions?
That was perfect. Just as scripted.
You called it. You thought it was perfect. Going with the gravitas. Don't take a question. Raheem, did you agree with that?
I'll be taking no questions.
Okay. Stephen K. Bannon, War Room Impeachment. Episode 104 will return to Capitol Hill in a moment.
War Room, Impeachment, Bannon, Miller, Kassam. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back. Episode 104, live from Capitol Hill, just yards away from President Donald J. Trump, was impeached, 3 weeks ago. A historic event. You're on War Room Impeachment. Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon, Jason Miller. Jason Miller ran the War Room and ran Communication Strategies, the chief communication strategist for President Trump's 16 and also for the transition. He was the comms director. Raheem was Nigel Farage's wingman, the rise of UKIP, and also Brexit, which we'll have to get to maybe on Saturday or Sunday, Raheem, talk about what's going on in the mother country. Okay, we're on Capitol Hill. It's War Room Impeachment. We're going to have a special because there's so much going on in the impeachment. However, we got to go back to the war. Another historic event's going to happen tomorrow. They're going to have a full debate and vote on a new War Powers Resolution in the House of Representatives. Isn't Nancy Pelosi supposed to be spending her time on the impeachment process? I mean, only the third time in American history. She forced us in a constitutional crisis before the holidays. We didn't get the USMCA. We didn't do anything else. Patricia Judge, he's a clear and present danger. We got to impeach him. Now tomorrow, we're onto the war powers debate. How are citizens supposed to comprehend this?
Well, this is part of the impeachment push. I mean, this is the Democrats' effort to go and restate or reinsert this clear and present danger narrative. The bottom line, the reason why Nancy Pelosi has been holding out these two articles of impeachment is because it's wafer thin, as Jonathan Turley said. There's nothing there. In fact, Rasmussen polling is out today saying that a record low 12% of Americans actually think President Trump will be removed from office during this whole impeachment.
So for them, it's a waste of time. What are you doing?
It's a complete waste of time. And when we see this current Iran conflict, that just shows how trivial and how small this is. So what Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are doing is to pass this War Powers Act, essentially saying that President Trump doesn't have the authority to be able to go and
okay, so Raheem, explain the war powers, the authorization military. Why is this a big deal? What is a war power? Why is Nancy Pelosi spending time on it? And why should anybody care?
Well, just before we get to that, and that is a big deal, I just want to make the following point. Nancy Pelosi has gone from impeaching the president of the United States to impeaching the presidency of the United States. She's jumping around. And, if you look at the trajectory over the last 6 weeks, USMCA, now we're on to the War Powers Act, jumping around, talking about resetting the impeachment process, going back, new witnesses, new evidence. She's jumping around. She's got a lot of plates up in the air at the moment, and that's a very dangerous position to be in, especially if you're a Nancy Pelosi who still likes to, go and open restaurants in the Navy Yard and be the big to-do on Capitol.
That really upset you guys last night.
I thought you were going to say I wasn't invited.
I thought you exactly. I thought you were going to say, Jason, why the nation's at war and they're shelling American troops with ballistic missiles. Nancy Pelosi's having a white wine, having a Chablis at some shishi restaurant in the Navy Yard. I thought you were going to get that snarky.
I did yesterday. No, I definitely had that snark, or maybe it was this morning when I brought it up. But this is, Raheem's exactly right. This is an all-out assault on the presidency. You look, literally the subheader for this resolution that's been introduced says, directing the president pursuant to Section 5C of the War Powers Resolution to terminate the use of United States armed forces to engage in hostilities in or against Iran. And so even though it's very clear that we're moving away from, we're de-escalating, we're moving away from potential conflict, they want to come out and absolutely kneecap President Trump. They want to show that he is some kind of clear and present danger. And this is a hear me now, believe me later. This will be the basis, along with the imminent threat or lack thereof.
You think they're doing this tomorrow to set the basis to add another part of the impeachment, which is they're going to say he lied about the imminent threat to get away from to get a dismissal on the impeachment charges because he knew we had the goods on him. So we're going to add another charge, and that charge is going to be about another abuse of power of jeopardizing American servicemen in his own for his own good.
Absolutely.
Do you think that's what she's doing?
Yes, it might not be for these two actual articles or the existing articles. It might be in the future. Maybe they decide to let the two that are currently up die and then come back to this. Absolutely. This is where Democrats are going. This is all about 2020 and the nullification process of Donald J. Trump.
And this comes back to impeaching the presidency rather than just the president. This is obviously, we've remarked before, this is within the normal confines of the push and pull between the executive and the legislative branch. There's nothing strange about that, apart from the fact that Nancy Pelosi's jumping around so much. But here's the thing: there's a lot of people on the political right who want the president to use his war powers correctly to seek congressional approval before launching any long-term military campaign. So I think this might even help undergird that. But the other part of it is the rescindment of the authorization of military force from 2003 was it? This is long overdue to be rescinded anyway, and I happen to believe, and this is not, I'm not some libertarian here.
The whole debate over this on the War Powers Act, remember the War Powers Act came out of the impeachment in Watergate. It came about what they felt the executive power abuse. Yep. This was also the Church Commission. This was that led to the Super 8 or the Gang of 8 on the intelligence side, trying to get the separation of powers, trying to get basically the legislative branch to have. They were supposed to be in charge of war, right, and try to reassert it. So it all goes back to the Nixon, to Watergate, to the abuses that the progressives, the liberals at the time felt that and even the constitutional conservatives felt that the executive branch was going away. So this is all inextricably linked with modern American political history and the way that we comport ourselves in fighting these wars, right? Particularly what they're saying, wars that are undeclared.
But what it also is a sign that the Democrats are still operating with the boomer mentality of how wars used to be fought versus how wars are currently fought. This wouldn't actually change a lot of the things that any of the last couple of presidents have done, which is targeted drone strikes. You don't require long-standing military congressional authorization to do that, and it's unforeseeable, at least we hope, touch wood, it's unforeseeable, but there would be another Vietnam-style situation whereby the president would need to go to Congress for that.
And there's, I think, an important point here, and this is why I think the administration had to get out there even much earlier than they did and explain why Soleimani was such a bad guy, why he needed to be removed. Because not only has he been on the U.S.'s terrorist list going back to 2005, he's been on the UN Security Council terrorism sanctions list since 2007. And if you went to it and actually went through and read it, they have all the individuals who are listed out, and then they have specific groups or companies. And Soleimani was on there as an individual. So here's someone who, I mean, this is not about the fight with Iran. This is about, here's an individual who's a terrorist. In fact, one of the worst on the, or was one of the worst on the entire planet. So I think that's where the Dems fall short. But it's a lot of this. We've lost this messaging argument because the ship's already sailed here.
Before we go back to the impeachment on the War Powers Act, this is not a debate that Joe Biden and his team want to see right now. Because if the House does it tomorrow, right? If this goes to the Senate, and you think it's pretty remote that the Senate will take this up, this goes back to Joe Biden's vote for the Iraq War. This goes back to Joe Biden's vote for this. This is where Bernie Sanders, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, the left will really come after Joe Biden. Again, it'll bring up, this is a scab that's going to show Joe Biden as his establishment best.
Yeah, and I mean, Joe Biden, keep in mind, Joe Biden's been in office so long, there was a Shah in Iran when he first came to Washington. I mean, when President Trump ran on the foreign policy failures from both parties, that's a big finger pointing right at you, Joe Biden. Not just this last 8 years with Obama. We're talking the 40 years of all the failures of previous administrations before that.
Nancy Pelosi, the master political strategist, actually is starting to get called out by people on our own side, right? The star of the new movie was called The Report, right? Feinstein of the Senate, Rowan Beatty's wife, Annette Bening plays Feinstein in this film, and she called out. I thought it was pretty extraordinary given the discipline. They kind of move in a phalanx. They never criticize each other. To have her, and she went right to the heart of it. If he's a clear and present danger, and it's so urgent, Nancy. Right, and she's from the Bay Area, right? So it's so urgent, Nancy.
If it's serious and urgent, send them over. If it isn't, don't send it over.
The longer it goes on, the less urgent it becomes, she said. Yeah.
Now, here's the thing that's interesting about that. She's not running again, right? It was so controversial she ran last time. Why would, in the communication strategy department, Jason, why would she even bring this up? Why of her of all people? She's not somebody who's got to worry about 20. She's not Jones of Alabama. It's not Manchin. It's not Kristen Sinema, who's not in Cycle, but who's, why is it her?
Because Dianne Feinstein, for someone who obviously we've opposed at every possible turn through this, Dianne Feinstein's a very serious player. And she's someone who's at a stage of her life, at a stage of her career, where she gives zero you-know-whats about what people think. And so when she gets to a breaking point of saying, hey, guys, we have serious things in the world, like the crisis with Iran, all the other things are going, we have a 2020 election coming up, and you guys want to keep going in reverse on this. Let's just get over with. And there's one thing I'd point out, too, in addition to Dianne Feinstein, because Feinstein has had an independent streak every now and then.
And she doesn't suffer fools gladly.
No. In the Russia investigation, she was actually pretty strong for big chunks of that. The thing that surprised me was Don Dick, Richard Blumenthal, senator from Connecticut. And he is out there calling out Pelosi, saying we were ready on the day the articles were voted to conduct the trial. At some point, it's appropriate to send them and in effect pass the baton to senators who are going to continue on this. And so even Blumenthal is saying, let's get on with it.
Loyalty and nostalgia. She has worked her entire career for this party. And we know Democrats put party above religion, above their work, above everything, right? She's worked her butt off for her entire career, and she watches as the American public get more and more disenfranchised, not just by the Democrats and their policy positions, but by the way they're treating this impeachment process. Remember, a lot of people out there, you look at the polls, you have to understand this, a lot of people out there, they think that the investigation should take place. They think that the trial should go ahead. They think that President Trump probably won't be impeached or removed from office, but they want to see the thing go to full extent now. Now, here's the thing. when you look at how Nancy Pelosi's treated this process, she is undermining it. And the polling every day comes back and shows us that fewer and fewer people buy into how the Democrats have handled this. Feinstein's being loyal to her party here. She's trying to say to Pelosi, hey, you're screwing this up for the next generation.
Let's go, the polling on Rasmussen. Let me just ask you. Rasmussen said 12% don't think he's being removed. Down to 12% only think he's being removed. So 88% of the American people are with understand what this is about. What did it show about whether they believed he should be impeached and removed from office? Because remember, when we first started this, it got to 52%. That's the reason that one of the reasons we started the show. We said, hey, this polling's going in the wrong direction.
I believe that number has been pretty consistent. I'm just seeing here, 46% of likely U.S. voters believe the president will be reelected. That's little change. Yeah. 33% think it's more likely the Democrat nominee will defeat Trump. I'd have to look through here a little bit more to see on the overall.
So what's the process now? Does Nancy Pelosi care what any of these people have to say, or she still understands she's got a problem? She doesn't have a strong enough case. She's afraid of being blown up on this thing. She still needs more time to get information. There's all kind of rumors you should know going around Capitol Hill of what Shifty Schiff is finding, and they're going through all sort of data and things like that. It may just all be scuttlebutt, but the rumor mill is going nonstop that they're continually working 24/7 to find things.
But this is the old Democrat Party and the new Democrat Party colliding before our very eyes. You had this whole process, pushed by the squad and the new intake. They wanted to impeach the president. They said on their election night they wanted to go in and impeach the MMFer. Those were their words. They wanted to put this on speed. Now that was resisted, I think, by a lot of the old guard. And now you have Nancy Pelosi really trying to balance all of this out and say, well, okay, their whole push to this, it didn't put us in a position where we've got a particularly good evidence base. We don't really have much to take to the American people. And the old guard are saying, well, look, you've started this thing now. You have to finish it. You can't try and abandon this in the middle. And of course, what are the squad doing today? I don't know if any of you have seen this video. They're standing behind when Sheila Jackson Lee is giving the speech, and they're giggling while another congresswoman in their own party is talking about American lives and American troops. They're standing behind her, giggling. They don't take this seriously at all. But somebody who does is Dianne Feinstein.
What now that McConnell said, "Hey, I've got the votes and I'm moving forward," she can still hold it back. But you're seeing Schumer saying, "Hey, I've got votes. I'm gonna start voting for witnesses." Where actually do you think we stand in this process? And is Nancy Pelosi going to come under some pressure after the War Powers vote tomorrow, and after that debate, sometime next week, is she going to come under increasing pressure? She's got to ship those articles.
Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut was on ABC's podcast today, and he said that he believes the articles will be sent over next week. And he had some pretty direct language along the lines of, "It's my understanding this is what would happen. This is what will happen. This is the direction that we're going." Is very much an educated opinion, so to speak. But it sounds like next week will be when these articles are sent over. And I do think that Pelosi is reaching a breaking point when you have these, as Raheem correctly pointed out, these party elders in the Democratic Party who are saying, hey, enough is enough if we're going to do this. But again, this is why Pelosi is having that War Powers vote tomorrow, because she realizes how anemic these two current articles of impeachment are, and this is laying the foundation for the next impeachment effort.
Let's talk about the team. We've had the Mark Meadows and the Matt Gaetzes in here, and we've argued about how they should have been included in the Judiciary Committee. We argued about how they should be included in the public hearings. We've argued about how they should augment the president's legal team. And now, Raheem, I think there's some breaking news this afternoon about how that team is being augmented, right? And it doesn't look like right now we still have some of the firebrands from the House on there.
Not just yet. We're looking at Jay Sekulow joining that team, but not. I don't believe that there's been any major changes in the last couple of hours. One of the things that I was just sort of staring at my screen trying to interpret as you guys are speaking as well. There is some new rockets being said to have struck outside the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad's green zone. That's some breaking news coming out in the last couple of minutes.
This is controlling your proxies. Right, we're going to find out. I just say, look, there's too many proxies. This guy was the connective tissue that tied it all together. He's a very charismatic leader. You're going to have a lot of lieutenants there think, hey, maybe I can step up and be a colonel. And what I got to do is take down some Americans. So I think this whole thing of, like, my point to this thing, it's all the law of unintended consequences. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? He can make this great speech. They can have some sort of communications through what they've done in the 2 acts, but you don't know what the rogue players are going to do.
Right. And this is also, too, I mean, this goes back to President Trump, the fact he did give a great speech today, because this definitely fueled the fire for Pelosi to push towards that War Powers Act vote tomorrow, simply for the fact to try to undercut President Trump and to try to take a perceived strength, the speech he gave today, and try to make it a weakness.
Well, tomorrow, people should be aware. I predict that the War Powers, a lot of it's going to be focused on the imminent threat. They're going to get that out there, bang it down, just like nobody's above the law. You know, the meme they had from the other debate, and that's why over the weekend we may do a special show just to pull this debate together, because I think it'll be quite conducive. But speaking of rogue players, the Politico story, and Raheem, I sent you to put it up. The Politico story, which was well reported, right? A lot of work, had some real snark in there about some of our favorite guys from Congress, right? I mean, the dismissive attitude of certain senior staffers from the Senate, right? They wanted to stay classy. They didn't want these people in the House. They thought it would be, I think the phrase clown show was in there. They didn't want it to be a circus. They didn't want, this wasn't necessary. They needed to keep the decorum and the gravitas of it. How do you think that played to guys in the House, and more importantly, to the Trump base out there that wants to see somebody? You know, let's get it on. We're not that interested in the decorum. We're interested in the exoneration of our guy.
So we've said from the beginning here that the reason why trial is so critical is because these Democrats are never going to stop trying to nullify the presidency of Donald J. Trump. And as we see tomorrow's the official kickoff. It's like the beginning of
season
college.
2.
It's
right.
It's like season 2 where it's like we have called this. We have called this literally for months now. They're not going to stop. They're going to come with their next effort. And so do you want to know why we need to haul in the whistleblower and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and all of these failed people who've pushed and are trying to take out President Trump for ridiculous reasons? It's because of this. And again, what is round 2 of impeachment over? A foreign policy disagreement. It's exactly what we've called from the beginning of this whole dang show.
Do you think, Raheem, that tomorrow at the end of this debate on the War Powers Act, after they've accused President Trump on this imminent threat, and they'll be taking Mike Lee's comments and all these comments, you haven't shown us anything, you use this it's wag the dog, because you know they're going to hammer. Are Mitch McConnell and the guys, or do you think President Trump's going to finally he's got to call Mitch in and say, hey, look, I like what you're trying to do for me, but I see what they're trying to do. And your, quick and dirty acquittal by having Schiff read the curated version of the 7,000 pages and then have a vote. I know you got 51 votes, then we all go home. It's not going to work for me, because that's the reality. The continual impeachment process is not going to stop.
Yeah, I really hope you're correct, and that the president sees that, because this is just, as they have admitted, this is the first impeachment, and there will be a second impeachment, and there may be a third impeachment. And in order to stave all of that off, and especially, there are some fair-minded people in the media out there. I know we tarnish all of them with the same brush sometimes, but there are some fair-minded people out there. Most of them listen to this show because they've got their heads screwed on right. For them, if they have a full trial and Trump is fully exonerated of this whole process, they're not going to then buy into the Democrats' spin the next time around. There was somebody on the one of the liberal podcasts. They had a call in yesterday, and a Democrat voter actually called in and said, "I don't want them to do this impeachment, because when he actually does something that is impeachable, we won't have to go after him."
They thought the bar was too. They thought this thing was so stupid that when you actually have something, you're going to have gotten the American people off guard.
They will be the party that cried wolf.
Okay, we got a couple of minutes here. Where do you think, just frame it for us, Jason, where do you think we stand in this whole thing, both the war and now the impeachment, and how it's converging on the effect and impact of Trump's presidency?
I think that the American public realizes how ridiculous this impeachment effort is. Even the people who want to see President Trump removed from office don't think that he will be removed from office during this round of the impeachment push. I think that we saw some indicators today from the new ADP numbers showing that December job growth is at least early indicators could be pretty good. I think when President Trump is back talking about his economic message, as well as some of these foreign policy successes, he's going to be in good shape. But it just goes to show you the Democrats are never going to stop, and their friends in the media are going to be right there by their side helping them.
About their friends in the media, briefly, Raheem, we got about 30 seconds. Last night when I flipped to, excuse me, Fox Business and Fox News and then go to MSNBC and CNN, it's two different countries, right? It couldn't be more different than the way the news is presented. How do you think that plays out?
Well, actually, I think Fox News and Fox News were two different countries at certain points. I watched CNN all of last night. I often do, and I thought the coverage was broadly fair. Everyone in a bit of a tizzy and in a bit of a panic about it. I mean, Chris Cuomo spent most of the day direct messaging me about some of my tweets from last night. But broadly speaking, I think that it was fair, and I think the headlines that we're seeing after that Trump presser this morning have been quite fair too.
Do you think they're fair? Why?
I do.
You don't think the focus on back down?
No, because didn't we want this to back down? Didn't we want this whole thing to de-escalate?
Well, he didn't actually back down. He actually said we're going to take this in a direction that's not going to be kinetic.
Well, he didn't go the Gorka route.
How did we go through a whole show and not bring up the Royals?
How do we not pump the podcast?
Okay, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.